So as we've been working through these steps, most of the steps so far have been limited to us. They've been focused on us and our things. They've been focused on us as people going through healing, going through recovery from brokenness or whatever issues that we have. If you think back on the previous steps, so far they have focused on our need to have God step in. Our brokenness, our sinful actions, our character flaws and defects. Today, though, the steps move from us towards acknowledging that we're not the only ones who have suffered through whatever we've had going on in life. I've shared with you many times that God created us for a relationship. God doesn't intend for us to do life alone. And today our step looks beyond us to those who we have done life with or doing life with, and the harm and the brokenness that we may have caused them. That's something we need to understand that I don't think we recognize as much, especially in today's world that pushes so hard towards individualism and live life how you want to and where you want to. What we do affects others. We do not live in a bubble. The things that go on in our lives affect those in our lives with us, friends and family and colleagues. You know, the early Jewish people had an understanding of what healthiness in doing life looks like. And that was that you had to have right relationship with God and right relationship with other people. If one was broken, so was the other. The teaching was you couldn't compartmentalize them and do one without the other. You couldn't say, God and I are in a good place, but I hate all these other people. I'm broken with them. I have nothing to do with them. And by proxy, you couldn't say, I'm in a right place with all of these people, but I'm broken with God. They were tied together. They had to be done simultaneously. These first 7 steps that we talked about are about restoring relationship with God. If you really think about it, they're the things that have gone on that have caused separation. The next couple we talk about will be about how we can restore relationship with people as best we can. The step we're talking about today is step 8. We made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Now, to unpack this step, I want to look at a story that anyone who has attended church for a while, especially as a small child, either knows by the scripture itself or a song that you may have been taught. I want to look at Zacchaeus this morning. Everybody knows the story? Some of you are chuckling. The song's running through your head, isn't it? Yeah, wee little man is he. The scripture we're looking at is Luke 19, 1 through 10. He entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man there was named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried down and was happy to welcome. And all who saw it began to grumble and said, he is gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner. Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, half my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. Then Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost. Now again, I know if we've been in church for a while, we know the story pretty well. It's scripture that is regularly preached on. It's in children's storybooks. Literally, there's songs like we talked about. But as we were looking at this scripture, sometimes there are things that are extra pieces to unpack. There are extra things beyond what we may have seen in the storybooks or in the song. There's a piece of information that you need to know this morning specifically as we're talking about this 8th step. What you need to know is that there were 2 kinds of tax collectors at this time. They were known as the Great Moki and the Little Moki. Basically, that translates out to little tax collector and great tax collector. An example of the little tax collector that we might be familiar with is Matthew, who became a disciple of Jesus. Matthew was the face of the tax collector that came and collected the taxes from you. Matthew was essentially the person who personally took your money, knocking at the door. That's who you went to drop off your taxes to. Zacchaeus, on the other hand, as we're told in Scripture, was the great tax collector. What that meant was he employed other tax collectors. Zacchaeus was the one that officially turned the tax money over to governmental officials. The great tax collector did not personally collect the taxes from individuals. The great tax collector usually didn't even come into contact with those paying their taxes. That's important because in verse 8, when we read this, Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." We need to realize how much work it's going to take Zacchaeus to honor this idea, this statement, to figure out who he's going to pay back. Because Zacchaeus doesn't just have to make amends for what he's personally done. It's not just the things that Zacchaeus has done on his own. He was the great tax collector. He's responsible for all the other tax collectors that worked under him. He's going to have to make amends for what they've done. If they've defrauded anyone, if they have done someone wrong. And so what he's going to have to do is he's going to have to go through the records of his tax collectors that work for him. Just imagine that. Your boss calls you, is like, "I need all the records of all the people you've ever collected taxes from. I need them in my office. I got to look through them." That's already a lot of work. That's already a lot of hassle. You're already making somebody else's day a bad day because they don't want to bring in all the files. But just imagine for a moment if there was a tax collector like me. I don't keep records. And now what's he got to do? Now he's got to figure out who he's got to pay back from the tax collector that didn't write it down. The first thing that we need to realize about putting this list together of whom we need to make amends with is it's not going to be easy. We're going to have to put work in to remember, to research, to seek out both those that we have harmed personally and those that were harmed by proxy of things that we have done. We're going to have to be ready to not figure out who all those people are. But also we have to be ready to take on the burden of witnessing the damage we've caused. This preparing a list, this putting together a list, this thinking of these names, the things that we have done to others will not be fun. It will not be easy. It will not be quick. It will be uncomfortable. And it will be hard work. I implore you, don't take the easy way out. Don't make the easy list. The people that you're comfortable talking to about making amends, the people that you're comfortable in going and speaking to. Do you have the people in your life that are easy to talk to? I do. Do you have the people in life that are just like, I don't really like to go talk to those people. They're intimidating. They're imposing. Anybody have those people? I've got those too. When you make your list, you have to include everyone. Again, not just the easy ones, but the hard ones too. So that's the first part of verse 8. That's the first thing that Zacchaeus is teaching us in making this list, is that there's work involved. But then there's the second part. That he will pay back anyone 4 times the amount of what he took. That's an important statement because Zacchaeus is actually going above and beyond what he would be required to do to make amends, to make restitution. You have to realize that there were laws back then, and the Pharisees essentially interpreted for others, this is how the law works. And so the Pharisees interpreted the law about restitution in this way. 4 to 5-fold restitution, that's what Zacchaeus is talking about by paying back 4 times, was only required if you stole someone's oxen and sheep. We're not saying you didn't have to make amends if you had done someone wrong. We're saying if you did it 4 times, you're only required to do it if you've stolen oxen and sheep. And you're only required to do it if you stole an oxen and sheep if you slaughtered or sold the oxen and sheep. And you're also only required to do it if a sufficient number of people witness the act. Check out that law. That's like a sliding scale. So if you stole the oxen, if you slaughtered them and sold them, and if there's a bunch of people that saw you do it, you have to pay back 4 to 5 times the amount. But if none of those things, if one of those things didn't happen, you didn't have to. And so as we're talking about money and not oxen, the first 2 aspects of the law don't even apply to Zacchaeus. They're not his. He doesn't have to do them. And the third one, about a sufficient number of people witnessing the act, as the great tax collector, nobody would have witnessed the act of him taking from others because he got it from his tax collectors. So in every aspect of the law, Zacchaeus doesn't have to do this. In every aspect of the law, to be considered righteous as the Pharisees taught, to be in right relationship with God, Zacchaeus should make amends, but he doesn't have to do it 4 times. So this is Zacchaeus' choice. This is something that he is putting on himself. He is deciding this is what should be done. And in doing this, what he's decided is essentially that the amends that he is offering, the restitution that he will do, will cost him. That's an important part of this making amends. It costs us. This step doesn't just say that we make the list. It doesn't just say that we write the names down. It says that we become willing to make amends. And willing essentially means we're ready to pay a cost. We need to try and not get by again in the easy ways with amends that are cheap or make these amends easier on ourselves. We need to make sure that we're not only putting again the easy people on the list to make amends with. We need to recognize that making amends is more than likely going to be more than just saying, I'm sorry. My bad. How often do we think that's the answer? I'm sorry. My fault. I'm sorry that I trashed your life. I'm sorry that I brought brokenness. I'm sorry that I caused issues. We're all good now. I'm sorry isn't going to get it done for some of the things that we've done to people. We have to move beyond sorry to a willingness to hear the harm that we've caused. To give them time and space. We need to be ready to have people drop their hurt stories on us. The things that we have done, the things that came from what we have done. And we need to be willing to sit and accept it through whatever way that they offer it. Whether that is quiet conversation, or yelling, or crying, or anger, or sadness. We need to be willing to listen, to give that time. Because that's making amends. It has to be more than just this thing that we offer and go on our way. It has to be instead an openness to say, I have done you wrong. I have caused you harm. I have caused you brokenness. What can I do? Part of what you can do is know what came of what you've done. We're going to have to look for some way to go above and beyond sorry to try and make things right. That's what Zacchaeus is doing. Now, I want to tell you, I don't know what that looks like for everyone. As we are all individual people with individual lives and people in our lives with us, there is not one pat answer for how to make amends, how to be willing to make amends. It's going to be different for different people. And so I can't tell you how to do it. I can only tell you that you need to be ready to do it. You need to be looking for ways to do it. That is, again, part of being willing to make amends. How can I do this thing? We're also going to have to accept that we may not have the opportunity at all to make those amends. We're going to have to accept that we may be willing to bear the burden, to pay that cost of carrying the wrongs we've done, because either the person we want to make amends with doesn't want to hear it, or because they're not able to hear it. Basically, this step is all about knowing who we need to make amends to. It's owning what we've done. I was just talking with Judah and Denise yesterday about the idea of accountability, about the idea of owning the things that we've done and stop blaming others and saying, yes, I did this thing, about owning the actions and the responses that we have to things that are done. We have to be willing to do that. We have to not make excuses for why we've done what we've done. And we have to not look for the easy way out. That's what being willing to make amends is about. This morning, our song of response is Amazing Grace. It's a fantastic song to bring this service to a close. If you don't know the history of the song, I'd encourage you to go look it up, but it was written by a gentleman in response to the slave trade. It was written by a gentleman responding to things that have been done that shouldn't be done and seeking forgiveness for his part in doing them and how he can be responsible and what he can do next. It's a fantastic song to bring this service to a close during our time of response to God. Because of the story, Zacchaeus is looking to make amends because he has experienced the grace that we're going to sing about. The grace that he doesn't deserve, that he cannot earn. And this is what it means to invite God into our process of healing and brokenness. That as we receive God's grace, we respond to God's grace. This morning as we sing these words, I hope we're all spending time with God. I hope as you respond to these words, as you're singing these words, you thank God for the grace that He's given you. I cannot speak for any of you. I promise you I'm not worthy of it. I promise you I've done things in my life to myself, to other people. I'm not worthy of the grace and forgiveness that God has given me, that God has blessed me with. And so I hope you spend time this morning, as I will, thanking God for that grace. But I also hope you use this time of response to ask God to help you. To ask God to help us, to guide us in our response to this grace by helping us answer the question of who do we need to seek out? And what do we need to do to make things right? Those are hard questions to ask God. I don't think we should ever go to God flippantly. If you ask a question, be ready for the response. And these are hard questions because these questions are ones that will put us in uncomfortable places that we don't want to be in, that will make us feel guilt and shame, that will make us feel hurt. And yet we need to be there because we've caused hurt. We need to be willing to step in and do the things that God leads us to the people that God leads us to bring the healing, to bring the peace that we can in all the ways that we can. So as Lauren comes up to lead us in this song, I'd like to encourage you. Again, it's a song of response. As God leads you to respond, do that. Let's all stand.